Oh, hi. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome back to the Wood County Recovery Roadmap podcast. On behalf of myself, the board staff, and members, we'd like to say thank you so very much for all of the support that you showed us on our very first episode. Today, we'll be sitting down with one of my favorite people to talk about one of my favorite things. My guest today is Emily Young, who currently works with Unison Health, our community behavioral health partner. But before she worked there, she was our macro intern here at the Wood County Animus Board. The topic of today's episode is Valentine's Day and the importance of self-advocacy in behavioral health care. So stay tuned. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to make sure to share some resources that are available in Wood County 24/7, 365 days a year. First is our very own website, wcadamh.org. Our website hosts a plethora of information and resource guides on the full continuum of behavioral health care here in Wood County. If you are in need of immediate crisis care, the following are some numbers that I always recommend adding to your phone. As always, if you are in need of immediate medical attention, dial 911. If you or a loved one are over the age of 18 and in a behavioral health crisis, dial the Wood County Crisis Line, managed by our partner, Unison Health, at 419-502-HOPE or 419-502-4673. If you or a loved one are below the age of 17 and in a behavioral health crisis, contact the Crisis Line managed by our partner, the Children's Resource Center, at 419-352-7588. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline just fully transitioned to their new number, 988. If you prefer to text, you can text the number 4 and the word HOPE to 741-741 to be connected to a crisis text line counselor. With that being said, let's head into our podcast. Welcome back to the Wood County Recovery Roadmap podcast. I think I said in the intro, but I'm here with one of my favorite people of all time ever. So this is Emily Young.
Hi, Kaylee. Hi, everybody.
So Emily Young used to be our macro intern here at the board and now works with one of our providers, Unison Health. But can we talk a little bit about I guess why you're one of my favorite people ever? So we met when you started working for us back in, oh my gosh, May
of last year. Oh my gosh, that feels like forever ago.
Yeah, so you actually came in with our new executive director, Amanda Kern.
I love her.
Actually met Amanda, came in and said, I promised someone an internship at Unison, and since she's transitioning, like, she wants to come with me to the board. And we kind of scrambled and we were like, oh my gosh, we've never had a real intern. How do we even do this? But then you came and we were all so excited.
Yeah.
And your big project with us was really helping us in the kiddo space, because at the time you were also doing some stuff with our residential unit at the Children's Resource Center.
Yes.
So how about, I feel like I said a lot of things there. So how about we start with what you did at the RU?
So when I was at the RU, I was a behavioral health technician, I think is what it's called, if I remember correctly. So a lot of, day-to-day stuff with them, meeting their families, running groups, just making sure they were safe while they were in the unit. That was pretty much my role there.
I love asking people what they do because it's such like a condensed version, and it's like, but really day to day it's the most like wild. I do a thousand
chaotic
things.
But I loved my job there. I'm so thankful for the people that I met when I was there. I made some great friends out of it. Had some really fun and not fun times, but
the nature of our work.
Exactly. Nature of behavioral health. You just gotta rally through it.
And one of the really big things that you did with us is you actually helped us write our ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act grant. And that is coming this year, where the CRC will be expanding that RU from 8 to 16 beds.
Yep.
And we'll have more of a robust, even more of a robust kiddo crisis continuum here in the county. And I have to say, we had our gratitude gala last year, and we gave Emily a little appreciation certificate. And I just, I said it then and I still feel the same now, where it's like the quality of your work and how much you did for us.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, Emily was a semester intern, so it was like a few months, and like all of a sudden we have $6.4 million.
I can't take all the credit. I really can't. Amanda and the CRC, but I am, really proud of the work that I did there. We're writing that grant, and I'm so excited for CRC. I think this is such an amazing opportunity. They're really going to, be able to reach so many more kids that need the help and families. So, even though I'm not there, I'm still wishing them the best of luck always.
Oh, absolutely. And if anybody out there is curious about the ARPA grant that we were just talking about, there is a press release and some news coverage from the BG Independent and the Sentinel about that. And if you're thinking, why haven't we heard any updates on this? Well, that is because we're doing a lot of background work, but the CRC and the board will be sure to put out stuff as soon as we have it, because we're super excited about it, as you said.
Yeah, I think everybody's excited. The kids are great, and it's very much needed. So wishing the board and CRC best of luck on this adventure. Happy to be able to be a bystander this time.
Oh, that's like such a thing in behavioral health. I feel like sometimes you have babies and you're like a project baby, and you're like, oh, I love watching you grow and being your parent. And there are some other things that are like, oh man, I cannot wait to meet you at your high school graduation.
Right, yeah. I'm like, oh, this was really fun then, and I can't wait to see how you all succeed, but I'll be back here watching.
Yeah, you're I feel like you're the babysitter where we dropped the ARPA grant off with you, you got to nurture it, and then, you'll be back.
I'll be back later. Gotta go for right now.
So just while we're on the topic of your employment history, could you tell me a little bit about what you do now with Unison?
Yeah, so I have one of the really fun positions where I'm split between two programs. I work in the dual program, which is substance use and mental health. It's SPMI, so you're looking at PTSD diagnoses, major depressive, bipolar, mood, personality, also with substance use. And with that, I run groups, do, initial intake assessments, individual therapy. I work on a great team with her name's Sarah, Andrew, and Pam. There's only 3 of us, but it's really fun. And then I also work in SPARA, which was the old partial program, and is currently ran just by one clinician, Carol Coder, who is an amazing art therapist, has been for 20-something years. And so, I've learned a lot. It's really fun. There I do a lot of groups and see individuals and do her DAs as well. So my day is filled with clients, which I love. So it's all good stuff.
Oh, man. I feel like one of the things that I took from you when we met in our macro work was just how fun it could be to just hang out with clients and just get to know them.
Oh my God. Every time that they want to tell me a story, I'm like, yes, tell me more. It's just so cool to hear their stories. And
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I really appreciate your perspective on is the substance abuse part of, where we are, because I think we've made some really good strides just as a society in destigmatizing mental health and, prioritizing your wellness. But I do think that there is just, and I will say, I'm talking as Kaylee, the opinions that I have don't necessarily represent the board, but I personally feel, there is a lot of work to be done specifically in the substance abuse realm, because really it's all the same of keeping people alive and making them the best versions of themselves. So I really love the perspective and the pioneering work that you do in the
Thank you.
in the sub space.
Yeah, it's really interesting being 23 and in recovery. For those of you who don't know, I am in recovery from substance use, and part of it is really what you just said, destigmatizing. Right. The goal isn't that people have to lose everything to realize that they have a substance use or they're an addict or whatever. The goal is to try to catch it early. That's when we talk about prevention work and breaking the stigma. It's talking about it and how real it is, not only for me, but for so many young people out there.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you. I appreciate the curiosity.
I am I've been very candid, the whole time I've been with the board, that I'm not clinician minded. I'm like people oriented, and obviously I'm in the marketing space, but I just like stand in awe of all of the people that are very clinical minded. And, the topic for our podcast today is self-advocacy, and I think that can be a very scary space to stand in when you're unsure. But one of the blessings that I see in this county is we have I know that technically you're in Lucas County now.
I still live in Wood County, though, so it counts, okay, everybody? I still live here. Pay taxes here.
But I think that, one of the blessings that we have specifically in this county is really not only the robust programming that we have, but also the amazing people that do the work. And, I think that there is so much strength in living it with your clients. It makes them feel so much more seen and valued when you can say no, I know this feeling. And, I think that so much of who you are is very comfortable.
Thanks.
So, but
try to be.
But we had a conversation where I was like, Emily, come on the podcast, and you were like, oh my gosh, yes. And then things in your life happened, and you said, I just don't know if I'm ready to talk about this.
Yeah.
And I just think that when we stand in scary spaces, you are you're such a light, because you weren't sure. And, here you are now, having a very candid conversation with us. And it's just us. I've been, alluding to the pulling back the curtain of the podcast when we talk about things that are, we're just in a room, we're just in my office hanging out.
Promise.
But, the thought of, I'm going to open this up to the community is just, I'm really appreciative of it.
Aww,
and I know our listeners will be, too.
Yeah.
Emily's one of my favorite people. What can I say?
I think too, when we're talking about self-advocacy, it is really scary. It's terrifying, honestly, right? But part of that is if you know you need something, you got to do it afraid. I think we as clinicians tell clients that all the time, and then, it's kind of, we're not, what's the word I'm looking for? Practicing what we preach.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I didn't come on this podcast and say anything, I would live with that, knowing that I'm no, you just have to do things when you're afraid. And then be but I'm not doing this because I'm scared.
Yep.
Because I'm scared. So, yeah, I think the goal is talking about things. Hopefully somebody hears this and is inspired. And maybe it's not substance use, but it's something that they're afraid to do.
For sure.
Because doing things or not doing things when you're afraid, I should say, only hurts you. You're the one who has to live with that, which is why self-advocacy is so important.
Oh, yeah. It's actually not funny, funny coincidental that we're here talking about that, the practice what you preach mentality, because, as I said in the first episode, I was a Vista twice, so I was a glorified intern twice. And it was right in the middle of my second internship that I sat with myself and I was like, okay, we're going to go get the help that we need because we're telling a lot of people to go get help and we're not doing the same thing. So, I also have that experience from the mental health perspective where I was like, all right, we're going to the therapist. Yeah. We're gonna do it afraid.
Always gotta do it afraid.
And that was literally my main point. Even in my first therapy session, I was like, I keep telling people that they deserve to be better and you deserve to be a complete person and treated as such. And then it's okay. Yeah. Tell that to the mirror and let's get this done.
Because I think a lot of us do that work in this field, regardless of if you're a clinician or not. And then it's oh crap, I feel really guilty and this shame because I'm telling people, hey, go get help or go do whatever. And then I'm just sitting back being no, that's okay. It's not me. I don't have this problem. And, with substance use, a huge part of it is you do live in your own denial, but you just don't know. And then once you know, though, once I knew that I needed help, if I didn't get it, I would have felt even worse. Because I would have been sitting there being such a hypocrite to my clients. And that would have caused who only knows. And that's not the case. Thankfully, I was, able to self-advocate and be hey, I need this. So, yeah, it's good stuff.
Oh.
It's scary stuff. It's scary stuff for anybody out there. I get it. Trust me. I'm sitting here afraid right now. But
I think that we've already touched on, this podcast was really just a way for people to get to know us and to feel, represented in the work that we do. But one of the things, my favorite soapbox to talk about with the board specifically, is that all 9 of our providers do operate on a sliding fee scale if their programs aren't free.
Yeah.
So if you don't have insurance or there's gaps in your insurance, please, please, please go to the provider, explain your situation. It will come back to the board. And I don't think we've ever denied
think of a time.
A single hardship form. So we really, our role here is to get the help that you need to you as fast as possible.
Please reach out, call somebody, something. We'll figure it out. Yes. That's what we're going to do.
Yes.
Yeah. We're going to figure it out.
I always feel like that should be behavioral health's tagline. Yeah. It's just you just come in and we will figure out the rest.
We'll find
you.
something. I can't tell you how many times we're call the board. Can we get funding through a grant? Can we this? Can we that? We're gonna find something.
Yep.
Because that's what community mental health is about.
Mm-hmm.
It's about having that open door policy that we talk about.
Oh, yep.
Or no wrong door. If this isn't the place for you, we're gonna find you somewhere else to go. So yes, please reach out if you're struggling.
We've talked a lot about our personal situations, but I kind of want to take a more of a backseat, a 50,000-foot view of what self-advocating can actually look like in behavioral health. So can you kind of, I'm trying not to word this in a weird way, and if it doesn't make sense, you can let me know. But you as a clinician, someone that sees clients, how would you expect a client to go about self-advocating with you as a clinician? Because I feel like there can be this line of oh my gosh, I'm walking in to see someone that I is an expert to me, but I think that I need a change, or how would you?
So when it comes to self-advocacy with clients, I think there's a lot of different ways it looks. I think one of the big ones too is if you are not comfortable with your provider, tell them that, because if they're a good clinician, they're not going to take it personally. Because, the whole point is that you're there. It's for you. It's not for the clinician. And so just communicating that. And it doesn't have to be wrapped up really pretty either. Because, again, if they're a good clinician, they're not going to take it personally. Yep. Clients self-advocate, I've seen before, is making their needs met. I run this intervention a lot in my groups where if I can kind of tell that somebody's struggling to say what they want or what they need, I'm I know what you're asking, but tell me what you want. And that's a really great way to start building on that self-advocacy, because it leaves us feeling empowered, right? When we're hey, this is what I want, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to go for it. So I think I run that intervention a lot with my clients. Oh, yeah. And it's good.
And I think, something to touch on, too, is just we recognize that healing is messy. I think that sometimes, there's this, maybe glorification is the wrong word, but there's this idea that, okay, I've decided I need help. I'm going to go in and I'm going to feel so good and it's going to be, fantastic. And it's unfortunately, there is this messy period where you're healing and you're just... It's hard. Healing is hard.
Oh, it really is. There's really no other way to put it than, I think sometimes in our world we kind of romanticize therapy.
Yes.
And we're I'm going to go to therapy and it's going to be great. And sometimes you're I'm really pissed at my therapist for what she said to me today, or I just left sobbing and I'm crying in the middle of a session. But that's actually how you know it's working.
Yep. 100%. I can't even tell you the number of times where I would leave my therapist's office and I would legitimately be how dare she tell me something that's so true?
Right, exactly. And a part of that, too, is, putting aside our pride and being somebody might actually know more about my life than I do.
Yeah.
Which is really hard because, we know ourselves best. And in some way we do. We just need other people to point it out to us. Because we probably knew we needed that all along. Just weren't willing to admit it. But hearing it from somebody else can make it feel really real.
For me, I unfortunately had this mentality of well, nobody will understand. And I feel like that's a very common way of thinking, because I totally get it. Life is the most, like, random assortment
Yes.
of moments. And for me, I've been pretty candid with people in my life. I've never, well, number one, I've never been a podcast host, so I can't say
I've never been on a podcast either, so this is really a first-time thing I'm doing.
So for me, my mom passed away when I was 10, and it was a sudden accident. And for me, 10-year-old me, I had so many people around me that were like, you need to talk to someone. We need to, like, get you into a good place. And little baby Kaylee was like, no, nobody will understand this exact moment in my life because this, and this happened.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I woke up and I was 22 years old and I was like, oh man, I should probably deal with this. And, I'm laughing because hindsight's 20/20.
Right.
And there was this moment, I was like, oh, why didn't you do this before? But for me, it was so deeply rooted in that idea of, like, I don't think that anybody else would be able to comprehend what I'm going through. And then all of a sudden I was in spaces where my therapist, people that I had been friends with for a long time, were like, these are not unique feelings. And I think that is also a little bit of a pride thing where it's like, only I have ever felt these emotions.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, actually. Like,
Actually, a lot of people have.
Yeah.
Being newer in recovery, a huge part of it, right? It's going to meetings and it's like, oh my God, yeah. And there's such a comfort in there because there is just a sense of relatability.
Yes.
That it's like, oh, I'm not the only one who's felt this way. And it can really bring you some peace and comfort to know that you're not alone. And that people want to help you.
And I think that's like, I maybe it's from a person that, identifies as more of a caregiver, but the best thing that I can say about Wood County really is we have rallied around so many people. I mean, even from, obviously not getting into specifics, but even watching people navigate through the system where we've had multiple providers get involved, we've had our community partners get involved. This is really a community that wants people to thrive. And I think that maybe that's not always the loudest voice that you hear, but really at the core of what we do are so many people that just say, okay, let's get you better, however that looks. And this job specifically has been the most, like, no, people are so good job that I could have ever asked to have.
Yeah.
But I do want to transition a little bit just because we were having a conversation before we clicked record, and I really wanted to ask you if you could kind of explain to the listeners what you explained to me about the difference between coping skills and self-care.
So the difference between self-care and coping skills, I think that there's this huge belief that self-care is, oh, I've had a really bad day, so let me go shopping or let me go take a bubble bath, right? Self-care is actually me creating a life I don't have to escape from. And that was told to me by my mother, who's also a clinician. And it really changed my entire perspective on what self-care is. Whether that be, having a daily routine that really helps you or setting aside 2 hours once a week, where you just do something for you right every week because that's what you need. That's self-care. Where a coping skill is, okay, I've had this really bad day. What am I going to do to make myself feel better? Yeah. So that is kind of my belief and what I teach clients, the difference between self-care and coping skills.
And I think we've talked a lot about language, but there's this difference between calling something therapy and something therapeutic.
Yes.
So like you mentioned, there's, retail therapy. And it's like, no.
Not quite.
And, I really liked, we kind of boiled it down before we clicked record, but we were talking about, retail therapy is like a really enjoyable thing. It's like it made me feel good.
Yeah, it's
great. As we mentioned, real therapy does not always leave you feeling that way.
No, actually, probably half the time it won't, which, sounds really scary, but then you will feel better after the therapy session because all that stuff is just sitting on you and in your mind, in your heart, wherever it is, and to get it out can leave you feeling with this sense of peace and serenity that, shopping just can't give you. I mean, make you feel good, because me too. I love to shop. If you know me personally, I'm always shopping.
I think for me, when I was in therapy, I've taken a little bit of a break, but that does not mean I'm not going to go back, because I surely will. But, I would leave therapy, and sometimes things just felt so heavy, but then in a day or two, even now, since I've taken a little bit of a hiatus, I feel like I'm meeting myself for the first time. And even like after, my communication style, the way I feel, the way, and now it feels more introspective too, where it's like, ooh, I know how I would used to react to this.
Yes. And watching yourself grow, talk about self-advocacy and empowerment. Like, to be able to stand back and be like, wow, I've really done a lot of hard work on myself.
Yes.
Because some days it won't feel like it either.
Yes.
But then you kind of get that, seeing the forest from the trees, even within yourself view, and you're like, oh, I didn't freak out and, yell at somebody or scream at somebody.
Just a quick aside, because, like I said, I want to let people meet me. I am medicated for my depression and anxiety, and that is also like my soapbox too, of like, it is okay if you need medication to be the best version of yourself. I have some stickers somewhere that say serotonin. It's fine if your serotonin is store-bought. Like, I really, I needed it. I really needed that aspect alongside therapy. But I eloped when I got married. We drove across the country to Vegas, and I had just started my antidepressant, and the first couple days were awful. Like, they were regulating me, and, all this serotonin that I had never, this little gas.
I've never experienced this before.
But we were getting ready for my wedding, and I put my wedding dress on. And we went outside to get in the car, and I brushed up against the car, and I got a small smudge of, like, oil or something from the car on my wedding dress. And I just started laughing, and my husband looked at me, and he said, oh my gosh, you are, like, not freaking out right now. Right, and I was like, I know, right?
This is great! I don't feel like I'm gonna combust.
Right. And I don't want to, like, add humor into everything, because there are, pieces like that. But there are just, like, parts of your daily life where you are like, oh my gosh, because I sought the help that I all of a sudden realized I needed.
Yes.
The way that I am as a human being is so much better than how it used to be. And I think that too is really powerful terminology for me. I love when people mention like the you that you were would be so proud of who you are now.
Yeah.
So, because I think about, 10-year-old me all the time, and I'm like, we're doing this for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that just goes to show, right, there really is a difference when somebody is forced into treatment and it's what they really want. Because you have to want it. Nobody can want it more than you want it. So I think you just bring up that great point, and talk about you, because, right, even doing this, part of self-advocacy is, being your authentic self. And I think it's so amazing that you're willing to get on a podcast for a community full of people, and you work at board level, and you're like, yeah, but I take meds and I go to therapy. Like, because there's no shame in it. There really isn't. When we talk about stigma, a lot of that is we lived in a society for years where, you suffered in shame. You didn't tell anybody your struggles. And, it feels good to be able to let that out and be like, no, this is me. This is who I am. And I have no shame about it. Yeah. Yeah.
And it takes a long time. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced it, and you've had clients that have experienced it, just, people in our lives. But I think that, like you said, looking at the forest for the trees, it's like watching the progress that you make. Some of it feels like very fast. Yeah. Where it's like, okay, I'm good, I'm comfortable in my own skin, and then comes, okay, but I have to stand in it. Yeah. And that's a different thing. But I think, really what we're boiling this down to is you deserve the help to make you the best version of yourself. And that doesn't have to look like anything to anybody. No. Like, you do not have to confine to whatever healthy might look like to other people. The only thing that matters is that you feel better.
Somebody told me when I, first started my recovery, you have to do recovery your way. And that's so, It's just so true. And recovery isn't just from substances, right? Recovery is from anything that's hurt you that you feel like you need to heal from. And you have to do it your way. So don't feel like you have to do it anybody else's way. It's going to look different for all of us. But when you are ready, help is here.
Yes. Everywhere.
Everywhere. And there's, such great clinicians out there that just really did get in this field because they want to help people.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So nice.
That's what, I think that we're only obviously 2 episodes into this podcast, but I keep thinking, I get on here and I turn the microphone on and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I love these people and I love this system. And, I don't want anybody to think that, well, yes, I am a board staff member. I am salaried. But this is like truly how I feel about, our county. And I can't sit here and pretend that I know, every clinician in,
right.
100-mile radius.
No.
But generally it's such a healing community, and we will do whatever we can.
Yeah, and that's not to take away from, the fact that unfortunately there aren't good clinicians out there. Yeah. And a lot of it, too, it's not even necessarily that they're good or bad. It's that they have their own stuff that they're not willing to face, which then means that you kind of might struggle to be a clinician because you might feel pretty hypocritical about this stuff. Right? We talked about earlier, practice what you're preaching, which can leave you feeling really guilty if you're a clinician. That isn't to take away from anybody who has had an experience with a bad clinician, but I would really encourage you to keep trying. Yes. Because there just are really good clinicians out there who
absolutely
really want to help. And it might take a couple, because I know I've been there.
Yep.
I've had a couple bad therapists, and I was like, ooh, you got to go. But now my girl, Leah.
Oh, yeah.
Shout out to Leah. If you know me in my life, I'm always talking about Leah. She's amazing. But it took me like 2 or 3 therapists to find her. Because the other ones I didn't click with.
Yep. Oh, there's that moment in therapy where you're like, oh my gosh, you're my person.
Yeah, I've been looking for you. I'm so happy to have found you.
Yes, exactly. Well, I think, let me ask if there's anything else you want to say about self-advocacy before we switch to a little bit of a lighter topic.
I don't think so. I think my biggest thing, I had a client, and I had heard this my whole life, but a client said it the other day, and she was like, closed mouths don't get fed. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. See, this is why I love working with clients, because I'm like, yeah, tell me more good things besides other parts about it. But, if you know that you're struggling, even though it's scary, reach out, because nobody can do it for you.
Yep.
Which is a little bit more of the tough love side, but you can do it too.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I really feel strongly in the, if we can do it, you can too. And I just think that that's a great mindset to have just in general, because, we both, I'm sure, I don't want to speak for you, but there's this moment where you're like, I can't. I can't.
Yeah.
No.
Being in recovery is constantly filled with fear of, I can't do this.
Yeah.
But somebody actually said that to me this morning. They were like, if so-and-so can, so can you. And I was like, all right, I'm going to roll with that and just keep going forward.
Yep. Well, thank you for talking to me about, we had, it's kind of the juxtaposition of this. I don't really know where the podcasts are going to go when I sit down. But last month, I sat down with, all the board staff and let you guys get to know us. But I feel like this episode specifically is really kind of the embodiment of what I hoped the podcast would be in a very, we're real people with real lives that... just as messy as anybody else's.
Messy.
So yeah, and I just wanted to talk a little bit. Part of the reason that we did self-advocacy as a theme is because it's Valentine's Day.
Yes.
So, well, this, the month of love, if you will.
The month of February is just, it's all pink hearts everywhere you go, so.
And I am 100% a Valentine's Day girl. For those of you that have met me, I always say that I'm a Care Bear trapped inside like a 12-year-old boy. I just love pink and hearts and flowers and all of the things.
Yeah.
But, I think part of the reason that I wanted to hook it to self-advocacy is just because, I love, my love language has always been gifts and affirmations and,
Right.
But I think I wanted to touch on, too, that just because some things can look, you look at things through rose-colored glasses, doesn't mean that everybody does. And, you know, I wanted to reserve some space for people that might be having a hard time with, you know, the winter weather or all of the love in the air. And, you know, I just wanted to reserve some space because I know that I love love.
Right.
And all the things. But, you know, I think that self-love takes a long time to acquire. And, you know, it's the standing firm in who you are, like we were just talking about.
Well, and self-love really begins kind of going back to that theme of self-advocacy. Yeah. I have to love myself enough to stand up for myself because nobody else is going to do it for me. But when we're talking about reserving space for people who might be struggling, you know, don't invalidate yourself either. The winter months are so hard. Yeah. So give yourself grace. Show yourself some kindness. You know, when we talked about those coping skills and self-care earlier, really try to implement those.
Yes.
Whatever it looks like for you too, because it's going to look different for everybody. And reach out to a friend. You know, isolation is really easy to do this time of year because it's cold outside and I don't want to go, and rather just sit at home, even if it's just a FaceTime call with somebody or a phone call. Because sitting there with it in your head is only going to hurt you, not help you. But yeah, no, Valentine's Day can be really hard. This entire month can be really stressful for people, really sad. Yeah. So yeah, I just encourage you to reach out to anybody in your life that you feel like you have support. And if you don't, there are other places you can call too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, lots of options. And if you do love, congratulations. Yeah, and I think too, self-care, especially in the winter months, can look like so many things. The biggest one though, for me, is not being alone. It's really just clinging on to anybody who I can, whether it be through FaceTime, through a text, whatever. And I think that there's this really negative stigma around like, oh, you're clingy. And it's like, but why is that bad? Yeah. I'm trying to, human connection. I'm
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if somebody in your life is telling you that you're too clingy and you're starting to feel shame about it, no. You're just looking for some connection, which we all need and want and desire.
You know, we were just talking about this because friend of the board, Miss K. Flowers.
Love her. Check out her book.
Yes, she is the most brilliant poet, activist.
Oh, she's amazing.
She actually, one of the things that we've just been talking about is that she just started doing some stuff with the Connection Center. If any of our listeners are unfamiliar, the Connection Center, it's a clubhouse down here in downtown Bowling Green.
Yes.
And it is for literally anyone that is working with any of our community behavioral health providers.
Yes.
You can drop in. They do super fun groups and they have parties. And it's a blast. And Kay, she is co-hosting their podcast. So I'll be sure to link that. Yes, she is also running their women's group. So they do things with like affirmations and they do some writing workshops because, as Emily mentioned, Kay is a poet. So you can pick up her book. So I've really been trying to hit the Connection Center hard and making sure people know that it exists.
Oh, yeah. It's such a great resource.
Oh, there's, you know, and if you have an interest, they're happy to accommodate that. I know that there's, like, crochet groups, there's tea parties, they watch sports together.
Oh,
like,
my goodness gracious.
Gonna
have to hit up the Connection Center.
Yes. Oh, my gosh. They have their monthly calendar. They update that. So I think that really plays into the, you know, there are spaces too that you might not even expect to find that human connection like we were talking about.
Absolutely. You know, you made me think of something when you were talking about positive affirmations and doing kind things for yourself. So important, right? When I say show yourself grace, that's what I'm talking about. Like, you know, saying positive affirmations can be so helpful, and part of a self-care routine could be saying them to yourself in the morning in the mirror. Because even on the days where you feel really good, it's still important to remind yourself for on the days when you don't feel so good.
Absolutely.
You don't feel as great. So yeah, just, you know, showing grace.
Oh yeah.
As much as possible.
Oh my gosh, I wish I could remember the name of the book. If I can find it, I'll add it to the description of this podcast. But I read a book once about an individual who his company had gone bankrupt. He had gotten divorced from his wife, and just a lot of like cataclysmic things happened in this person's life. So he resorted to telling himself he loved himself all the time.
Oh,
that
I love that.
he made that his like reoccurring thought. And he, you know, the whole book is like, I say it to myself in the shower, I say it out loud when I have to hear it out loud. And I think about that book all the time because, you know, that's become my thing of like, my reset point is I love myself. Like, so I can, whatever, I feel like sometimes the negative part of your brain that wants to, you know, tell you that you're not good at something or that wants to hurt your feelings can be louder than the voice that tells you that you're fantastic, you're here, you deserve to be here. So I really like using that as a reset point of like, okay, you're here, you're in this moment, you love yourself, let's go forward.
When we talk about, so my coworker Carol, she always is talking about being in the here and now, and when I first met her, I was like, Carol, what are you talking about? I can't be in the here and now. I'm, you know, trying to think about 20,000 things at once. Yes. But there really is something to be said for being able to stand there, tell yourself whatever you need to say to ground yourself and just think, how do I feel in this moment? It really can change not only just your, you know, overall outlook on the day, but really how you're moving throughout your days. It can feel less like you're going through the motions and more like, okay, I'm in this moment. I'm okay. I'm safe. And keep moving forward. Oh, yeah.
I think, you know, that too, naming it is such an important thing.
Oh, yes.
Where you asking yourself, you know, what is that I'm feeling and why did this happen?
Yes.
Was like, and it sounds so simple when I say it, right? But like when my therapist told me that, I was like, I don't usually do that. I feel it, but I don't say, okay, in this moment you are mad because of this. So that's something we were talking about actually just recently. Amanda and I were talking about getting pins for all the board staff members with a little scale of like, how are you feeling? Yeah. So, you know, you move your smiley face into the red. You're like, okay.
Don't talk to me.
Let's yes.
Can I get one of those too? Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I would appreciate that. People at work just were like, don't touch me.
But, you know, I think throughout this whole podcast, we've just done a really good job of, you know, humanizing who we are, and we understand that there can be a lot of, there will be a lot of big feelings as you navigate any form of recovery or treatment.
And even if you're not, you're still human and you're going to have a range of feelings. But really being able to identify them and name them can stop a lot of that chaos that you may feel. Yes. Because, that's kind of what we talk about going through the motions is I'm just living in this chaos. Yes. So stopping, pausing, trying to name, identify, deep breath, move on. It's one of the things I practice with clients when you're talking about your therapist earlier. Yep. I'm like, pause. How do you feel? 30 seconds, go. And then, you know, I have a mom who's a DBT therapist. We talk about mindfulness all the time. So when I'm feeling really big things too, or I'm telling a story, it can be really easy for me to not allow myself to feel, which is when we talk about, you know, disassociation, not really feeling connected, pausing, how do you feel, ground, say it again. And trying to work through that can really be helpful. Oh, yeah.
Well,
fun stuff.
I think that the listeners are gathering that literally Emily and I could spend an eternity in this room just talking about this.
Mind you guys, I got here like an hour and a half ago, and we're just now like getting to the podcast part because, you know, this is how me and Kaylee work.
But, you know, I want to, I think we've said a lot of really good things, and I'm going to have you back on the podcast.
I would love to. This was fun, y'all. Again, first time though, so be gracious to me. Yes. Because I be gracious to myself.
I can't even tell you the amount of times that first episode, I'm sitting in my office with my door shut, and I'm just repeating the same script. But the poor people that work around me must have heard me say the same thing like 15 times. But I think, you know, I really appreciate everyone for listening. And
absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. And we're here. We're always here. So if, you know, you can always contact the board. You can contact any of our providers. Yeah. I'll say it at the top of the episode, but we have the Wood County Crisis Line, which Unison manages. So there is, you know, we like to say Help is here, hope is here.
Oh, I love that. Help is here, hope is here. Yes, because we are here and we want to help.
Yes. Anytime. Especially at the crisis line.
Especially at the crisis line, but don't call me after 5.
Yeah. Emily and I do not work in the crisis system.
No. See, I did my time in crisis. It was really fun, but no longer.
So, but yeah, I just, I want to say thank you to you for
thanks.
hanging out with me and
happy to be here, truly.
We don't need an excuse to talk to each other.
No. But it's always nice to have one because then I'm like, I'm going to see Kaylee, but it's like a work thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't have to be like, I just want to go hang out with Kaylee. Like, no, y'all, it's for work. I'm doing work on the weekends out here.
Oh, yeah. But, just being so candid with everything, I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to have you back.
Thanks. I can't wait to be back. Thank you. Thank you for being candid because it's important.